She obeys when it serves her. She gives you what you want, until she gets what she needs. And when she's done, she leaves, without ever having loved you. Carl Jung didn't romanticize female love. He saw through the performance. He understood something most men realize too late. Many women don't love. They attach. They calculate. They adapt. You thought she cared, but she was just mirroring your desire. You gave everything. She gave enough to keep you there. This isn't a story of heartbreak. It's a blueprint of how feminine instinct works beneath the masks. And once you see it, you won't unsee it. In this video, we'll uncover the psychology behind the woman who never loved you, not because she's evil, but because she never had to. Carl Jung discovered something that shakes men to their core. Inside every woman lives a masculine energy he called the Animus. When this inner man is wounded, she becomes incapable of genuine love. She doesn't even know it's broken. You've seen her. The woman who seems perfect on the surface but feels hollow underneath. She says the right words, makes the right moves, but something essential is missing. Jung understood why. Her animus, the part of her that should connect with your masculine energy, is shattered. This isn't about her hating men. It's deeper. Her inner masculine is corrupted, twisted by past trauma or neglect. Maybe her father was absent. Maybe he was cruel. Maybe he was weak. Whatever happened, it broke the template for how she relates to masculine energy. When her animus is wounded, she doesn't love men. She uses them. She sees you as a tool to fix what's broken inside her. Your strength becomes her borrowed confidence. Your love becomes her validation drug. Your resources become her security blanket. Jung observed that these women develop a peculiar relationship with masculinity. They're simultaneously attracted to it and repelled by it. They need it, but resent needing it. They crave masculine energy, but can't truly receive it because their inner masculine is at war with itself. She'll test your strength constantly, not because she wants you to be strong, but because she's trying to heal her broken animus through you. When you pass her tests, she doesn't feel love. She feels temporary relief. When you fail them, she doesn't feel disappointed. She feels confirmed in her belief that men are fundamentally flawed. This is why she can't love you the way you love her. Her animus creates a distorted lens through which she sees all masculinity. You're not a person to her. You're a projection screen for her inner conflicts. She's not relating to you. She's relating to her damaged masculine shadow. The tragedy is that she genuinely believes she's loving you. But what she calls love is actually dependency disguised as affection. She needs you to function, but she doesn't value you as an individual. You're interchangeable. Any man who fulfills the same functions would receive the same love. Jung saw through this performance because he understood that true love requires integration. A woman with a wounded animus cannot integrate masculine energy properly. She can only consume it, manipulate it, or rebel against it. She cannot dance with it in the way that creates genuine romantic connection. This is why she leaves when she's done extracting what she needs. Once her animus has temporarily stabilized through your energy, she no longer requires your presence. The love you thought you shared was actually just her wounded psyche feeding off your masculine essence. 2. The dark twin. She hides from everyone. Jung revealed that every woman carries a shadow, the dark twin of her public persona. This shadow contains everything she refuses to acknowledge about herself. When this shadow grows too large, it devours her capacity for authentic love. She shows you her light side, the caring, nurturing, gentle woman who seems to embody everything feminine and beautiful. But Jung knew better. He understood that this light persona often exists specifically to hide something much darker underneath. Her shadow contains her rage, her selfishness, her cruelty, her manipulation. All the qualities she's been taught are unacceptable for women to express. Instead of integrating these aspects healthily, she buries them so deep that they begin to control her from the unconscious. This is why she can hurt you with such precision while maintaining complete innocence in her own mind. Her shadow knows exactly where your weak spots are, but her persona never acknowledges delivering the blows. She's not lying when she acts confused about your pain. Her conscious mind genuinely doesn't recognize her shadow's actions. Jung observed that women with large, unintegrated shadows develop a peculiar form of unconscious cruelty. They destroy relationships while believing themselves to be victims. They manipulate while thinking they're being authentic. They take while believing they're giving. The shadow operates through what Jung called projection. Everything dark within her gets projected onto others. You become the selfish one. You become the manipulator. You become the one incapable of love. Meanwhile, her shadow feeds and grows stronger through these projections. She can't love you because love requires owning all parts of herself, including the ugly parts. But she's built her entire identity around being good, pure, innocent. To acknowledge her shadow would shatter this identity. So instead, she makes you carry the darkness for both of you. This is why relationships with these women feel crazy-making. You're constantly defending yourself against accusations that feel like they're coming from nowhere. But they're not coming from nowhere. They're coming from her disowned shadow, projected onto you with surgical precision. The shadow also explains her hot and cold behavior. When her persona is in control, she's loving and warm. When her shadow emerges, she's cold and cruel. But she never connects these two states because she's convinced they're separate people, and only one of them is really her. Jung understood that, until a woman integrates her shadow, she cannot love authentically. She can only love the image she has of herself, and she needs you to reflect that image back to her. The moment you mirror anything that reminds her of her shadow, the love disappears. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. 3. The mother wound that poisons everything. Carl Jung discovered that some women carry a mother complex so deep it corrupts every relationship they enter. They're not loving you. They're trying to heal a wound that can never be healed through romantic love. The mother complex isn't just about having a difficult mother. It's about carrying an unresolved energetic pattern that shapes how she relates to everyone around her. Some women become eternal daughters, seeking a mother figure in every relationship. Others become devouring mothers, consuming their partner's autonomy. Jung observed that women with mother complexes cannot separate their needs from others' needs. They don't know where they end and you begin. This isn't intimacy, it's psychological fusion. She thinks she loves you, but she's actually trying to complete herself through you. When she has the eternal daughter complex, she unconsciously seeks someone to take care of her the way her mother never did. Your role becomes providing the unconditional love and security she missed in childhood. But here's the trap. No romantic partner can ever fulfill a maternal role completely. You'll notice she becomes helpless in situations where she should be capable. She'll create crises that require your rescue. She'll make herself small and vulnerable to trigger your protective instincts. This isn't conscious manipulation. It's an unconscious reenactment of the mother-child dynamic she never resolved. The devouring mother complex is even more dangerous. Here, she unconsciously sees you as her child to control and possess. She'll suffocate you with care while slowly eroding your independence. She gives not out of love, but out of a compulsion to be needed. Jung realized that both types cannot love as equals because they cannot relate as equals. The eternal daughter sees you as a parent figure. The devouring mother sees you as a child. Neither sees you as a man worthy of adult romantic love. This complex explains why she can seem so loving while being fundamentally unavailable. The love she offers isn't romantic love. It's the desperate attempt of a wounded child to finally get what she missed, or the controlling care of a mother who cannot let go. The mother complex also creates impossible standards. If she's the eternal daughter, no amount of care will ever be enough, because you cannot replace what she lost in childhood. If she's the devouring mother, any assertion of independence feels like abandonment because you're threatening her sense of purpose. Jung saw that these women often choose partners who activate their complex rather than challenge it. They're not attracted to men who could love them as women. They're attracted to men who fit their unconscious template of the parent-child dynamic they're trying to resolve. The tragedy is that healing requires facing the original wound, not recreating it in new relationships. But facing that wound means acknowledging that the love she seeks from you cannot actually heal what's broken inside her. And most women with mother complexes would rather keep searching for the perfect parent than accept they must heal themselves. 4. The mask. She wears so well you never see her. Carl Jung understood that some women live their entire lives behind what he called the persona, a mask so perfect that even they forget who exists underneath. This isn't occasional pretending. This is complete identity replacement. She doesn't love you because there's no authentic self left to do the loving. You fell in love with her performance, the way she laughed at your jokes, how she seemed to understand you perfectly, the way she mirrored your interests and values. You thought you'd found your soulmate, but Jung would tell you something that cuts deep. You never met the real woman. You met her persona, and the persona cannot love. It can only perform love. The persona develops as a survival mechanism. Maybe she learned early that being authentic was dangerous. Maybe her real self was rejected, criticized, or ignored. So she created a false self that gets positive responses. Over time, this mask becomes so sophisticated that she believes it's who she really is. Jung observed that women with overdeveloped personas become chameleons. They study what each man wants and become exactly that. With you, she became the perfect girlfriend. With her ex, she was someone completely different. With her next boyfriend, she'll transform again. She's not being fake. She genuinely becomes these different versions because she has no stable core identity. This is why the relationship felt so intense so quickly. She didn't gradually reveal herself to you. She instantly became what you wanted. Your dream woman appeared overnight because she constructed herself from your desires. But construction isn't creation. Performance isn't authenticity. And mimicry isn't love. The persona explains her uncanny ability to say exactly what you needed to hear. She wasn't reading your mind. She was reading your reactions and adjusting her performance accordingly. Every conversation was a feedback loop where she calibrated her responses to maximize your positive reaction. You thought she understood you deeply, but she was actually studying you like a script. Jung realized that these women become addicted to the validation their persona receives. They need constant confirmation that their performance is working. Your love becomes their drug, but they're not addicted to you. They're addicted to the proof that their mask is convincing. When you stop providing that validation, or when maintaining the persona becomes exhausting, they disappear. The most disturbing aspect is that she genuinely believes her own performance. She's not conscious of the deception because she's deceived herself first. When she tells you she loves you, she means it in the moment, but she's speaking as the persona, not as her authentic self. The real woman underneath might be incapable of love, indifferent to you, or simply absent entirely. This creates a peculiar form of emotional emptiness. You pour your authentic feelings into what you think is a real relationship, but you're actually feeding a psychological construct. It's like trying to love a mirror. It reflects your emotions back to you, but there's nothing substantial behind the surface. Jung saw that persona-driven women often have multiple versions of themselves running simultaneously. She's the devoted girlfriend with you, the wild party girl with her friends, the innocent daughter with her family. None of these versions communicate with each other. They exist in separate compartments, each believing it's the real her. The relationship ends when maintaining your version of her becomes too costly, or when a new man appears who requires a different performance. She doesn't leave because she stops loving you. She leaves because your version of her is no longer useful. The woman who loved you never existed. She was a temporary construction that served its purpose and was then dismantled. This is why closure feels impossible. You're trying to understand the motivations of someone who was never really there. You're seeking explanations from a person who existed only as a reflection of your own desires. Jung would tell you that you cannot mourn the loss of someone who never existed. You can only mourn the illusion of love you created together. 5. The wound that makes her run before you can. Jung discovered that some women carry such deep abandonment terror that they develop an elaborate system to avoid ever being left again. They don't run because they don't love you. They run because they love the control of leaving first more than they could ever love staying vulnerable. This isn't the obvious abandonment fear that makes women clingy and desperate. This is the sophisticated version that masquerades as independence and strength. She learned early that everyone leaves eventually, so she developed a strategy. Get what you need, then leave before they can hurt you. It's not cruelty. It's survival. Jung observed that these women have an almost supernatural ability to sense when a man is beginning to pull away, lose interest, or consider leaving. They've developed hypersensitive radar for the smallest signs of rejection, a delayed text response, a distracted kiss, a moment of hesitation when making future plans. Where other women might fight for the relationship, she starts planning her exit. The abandonment wound creates a peculiar relationship with love itself. She desperately wants it but cannot trust it. Every moment of happiness comes with the shadow of anticipated loss. She cannot be present in loving moments because she's constantly scanning for signs that it's about to end. This hypervigilance makes genuine intimacy impossible. You thought her independence was attractive, the way she didn't need you, didn't cling, didn't demand constant reassurance. But Jung understood that this wasn't healthy independence. It was defensive detachment. She stayed emotionally distant not because she was strong, but because closeness felt like setting herself up for devastation. The wound manifests in subtle tests that you probably never recognized. She would create small conflicts to see if you'd leave. She would withdraw affection to see if you'd fight for her. She would become difficult to see if you'd choose her anyway. But these weren't invitations for you to prove your love. They were reconnaissance missions to gather data about your commitment level. Jung realized that women with abandonment wounds often sabotage relationships at the exact moment they become most meaningful. The deeper the connection grows, the more terrifying the potential loss becomes. So she creates distance, picks fights, or finds reasons why you're incompatible. It's not because she doesn't love you. It's because she loves you enough that losing you would destroy her. This explains the confusing mixed signals. One day she's planning your future together. The next she's listing your incompatibilities. She's not being manipulative. She's genuinely torn between her desire for love and her terror of loss. Every step closer to real intimacy triggers her abandonment defense system. The most painful aspect is that she often leaves just when you're falling deepest in love. Your increasing attachment feels threatening to her wounded psyche. The more you invest, the more catastrophic her potential loss becomes. So she cuts her losses while she still can, leaving you bewildered about what went wrong. Jung saw that these women develop an internal narrative that frames leaving as self-protection rather than abandonment. She's not running away from love. She's running towards safety. She's not hurting you. She's preventing you from hurting her. This narrative allows her to leave while maintaining her identity as someone who values love. The abandonment wound also creates a peculiar form of emotional bookkeeping. She's constantly measuring what she's invested versus what she's received, ready to withdraw her assets the moment the balance feels unfavorable. Love becomes a risk management exercise rather than an act of faith. The cruelest irony is that in trying to avoid abandonment, she guarantees it. By leaving first, she creates the very rejection she fears. But her wounded psyche interprets this as proof that she was right to be cautious, not evidence that her strategy is self-defeating. Each relationship that ends this way reinforces her belief that leaving first is the only way to maintain control. Jung would tell you that you cannot love someone out of their abandonment wound. The wound existed before you and will exist after you. Your love, no matter how genuine, cannot compete with a survival strategy that has kept her emotionally safe for years. She doesn't leave because your love isn't enough. She leaves because no love could ever feel safe enough to risk staying for. 6. The fortress she built around her heart. Carl Jung understood that some women construct psychological fortresses so sophisticated that they can simulate intimacy while remaining completely unreachable. They don't avoid vulnerability because they're cold. They avoid it because being truly seen feels like psychological death. You thought you knew her intimately. She shared stories from her past, talked about her dreams, even cried in front of you. But Jung would reveal the devastating truth. Everything she shared was carefully curated information designed to create the illusion of openness while protecting her core self from exposure. You were allowed into the courtyard, never the castle. The fear of vulnerability develops as a response to early emotional trauma. Maybe she trusted someone completely and was betrayed. Maybe she showed her authentic self and was rejected. Maybe she learned that revealing weakness invites attack. So she developed layers of protection so intricate that even she sometimes forgets where the defenses end and the real person begins. Jung observed that these women become masters of emotional misdirection. They'll share a painful memory from childhood while revealing nothing about their current fears. They'll discuss their deepest insecurities while keeping their true desires hidden. They create intimacy theater, all the props and staging of emotional connection without any actual exposure of the self. This is why conversations with her felt simultaneously deep and frustrating. She would talk for hours about meaningful topics, but you'd walk away feeling like you hadn't learned anything essential about who she really was. She specialized in vulnerable-sounding revelations that actually revealed nothing vulnerable at all. The fortress manifests in her relationship with physical intimacy too. She might be sexually available, even adventurous, but there's an invisible barrier that prevents true erotic connection. Sex becomes another performance space where she can appear open while remaining fundamentally closed. You're making love to her body while her essence watches from behind bulletproof glass. Jung realized that women with vulnerability terror often choose partners who don't threaten their defenses. They're attracted to men who are satisfied with surface-level connection, who don't ask probing questions, who accept the illusion of intimacy without demanding the reality. If you were trying to reach her real self, you probably felt like you were failing at something undefined. The fear creates a peculiar relationship with love itself. She wants to be loved, but only the version of herself that she's constructed for public consumption. The idea of someone loving her authentic self, with all its messiness and imperfection, terrifies her more than being alone. So she ensures that no one ever gets close enough to love the real woman. This explains why she could say, "I love you," while remaining emotionally unavailable. The love she offered was real, but it was the love of someone speaking from behind a mask to someone she kept at a safe distance. It was fortress-to-fortress communication, not heart-to-heart connection. Authentic love requires the courage to be truly seen, and she had systematically eliminated that possibility. The fortress also explains her ability to end relationships without apparent emotional devastation. She didn't lose someone who truly knew her. She lost someone who knew her representative. The real woman remained protected, untouched by the relationship's end. You were grieving a connection that, from her perspective, never fully existed. Jung saw that these women often mistake emotional numbness for strength. They pride themselves on not needing anyone, not depending on others for validation, not falling apart when relationships end. But this isn't emotional maturity. It's emotional paralysis. They've confused invulnerability with independence. The most tragic aspect is that the fortress eventually becomes a prison. What started as protection from emotional harm becomes protection from emotional life itself. She cannot be hurt deeply, but she also cannot love deeply, feel joy deeply, or experience the full spectrum of human connection. The walls that keep pain out also keep life out. The fortress mentality creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because she cannot allow herself to be truly vulnerable, she never experiences the deep love that could make vulnerability feel safe. Because she never experiences that love, she has no evidence that vulnerability can lead to anything other than pain. The protection system maintains itself by preventing the very experiences that could heal the original wound. Jung would tell you that trying to storm her fortress will only strengthen her defenses. The harder you push for real intimacy, the higher she builds her walls. You cannot love someone into vulnerability. The decision to lower her defenses must come from within, and it requires her to choose courage over safety, a choice she may never be willing to make. 7. The battle she fights against every woman. Carl Jung uncovered a disturbing truth about feminine psychology. Some women are so consumed by unconscious competition with other women that they cannot experience genuine love for anyone. Every relationship becomes a battlefield where she's fighting invisible enemies, and you become collateral damage in a war you didn't know existed. This isn't the obvious jealousy that makes women check your phone or interrogate you about female co-workers. This is a deeper, more insidious form of competition that operates below conscious awareness. She's not just competing for your attention. She's competing against every woman who has ever existed in your life, including those who existed before she was born. Jung observed that women with competitive complexes view other females as existential threats to their identity. Your mother becomes a rival for your primary loyalty. Your ex-girlfriend becomes a standard she must surpass. Your female friends become potential replacements she must neutralize. Even women you've never met, actresses, models, the barista at your coffee shop, become competitors in a game where losing means annihilation. The competition extends beyond your relationships with other women. She's competing against idealized versions of femininity that exist only in her mind. She must be more beautiful than the perfect woman, more interesting than the fascinating woman, more lovable than the irresistible woman. But these standards are impossible to meet because they're not based on real people. They're based on her deepest insecurities projected outward. This is why she could never truly see you as an individual. You weren't a man with your own preferences, history, and desires. You were a prize to be won in her ongoing competition with womankind. Your love wasn't valuable for its own sake. It was valuable as proof that she had defeated her invisible rivals. She didn't love you. She loved winning you. Jung realized that competitive women often have a distorted relationship with their own femininity. They simultaneously over-identify with being female while harboring deep resentment toward feminine nature itself. They compete with other women because they're really competing with the parts of themselves they cannot accept. Every victory over another woman is a temporary victory over their own self-hatred. The competition creates a peculiar form of paranoia in relationships. She reads threats into innocent interactions, interprets kindness toward other women as betrayal, and sees conspiracies where none exist. A waitress who smiles at you becomes a seductress. A female colleague who calls about work becomes a predator. Your politeness to other women becomes evidence of your disloyalty to her. This explains why she could be possessive while being emotionally distant. Possessiveness wasn't about love. It was about securing her territory against invasion. She needed to control your interactions with other women, not because she treasured your connection, but because losing you to another woman would represent the ultimate defeat in her psychological war. The competitive complex also manifests in her relationship with your past. She cannot accept that other women existed in your life before her because their existence diminishes her victory. She wants to be your first everything, first love, first sexual experience, first heartbreak. When that's impossible, she tries to rewrite history by making you forget or devalue previous relationships. Jung saw that these women often choose partners who activate their competitive instincts rather than soothe them. They're attracted to men who have options, who have had meaningful relationships with other women, who are desired by other females. But this attraction guarantees ongoing torment because his desirability means constant threats to her supremacy. The competition creates exhaustion in relationships. Instead of enjoying love, she's constantly defending against imaginary rivals. Instead of building intimacy, she's strategizing to maintain her advantage. Instead of being present with you, she's fighting battles against women who may not even know she exists. The most destructive aspect is that the competition never ends. Even if she successfully isolates you from all other women, she continues fighting against the women in your past, the women in your imagination, the women who might exist in your future. Victory is impossible because the enemy is infinite. Jung understood that competitive women cannot love authentically because love requires seeing the other person as valuable in themselves, not as a trophy in a contest. They cannot experience gratitude for love received because they interpret it as their due reward for winning. They cannot feel secure in love because security would mean ending the competition, and the competition has become their identity. The tragedy is that she often wins these competitions while losing everything that matters. She successfully drives away other women, controls your social interactions, and secures your exclusive attention. But in winning the battle for your devotion, she destroys the conditions that could have made that devotion meaningful. You end up belonging to someone who cannot appreciate what she has won because she's already scanning for the next threat to defeat. 8. The prison she built that became her identity. Carl Jung discovered that some women become so addicted to their own suffering that they cannot allow healing, growth, or genuine love to enter their lives. They don't reject love because they're incapable of it. They reject it because it threatens the victim identity that has become their source of power, meaning, and connection to the world. You tried to love her out of her pain. You offered solutions to her problems, comfort for her wounds, hope for her future. But Jung would explain why this felt like pushing against an immovable wall. She needs her suffering more than she needs your love. Her pain isn't a problem to be solved. It's a lifestyle to be maintained. The victim identity develops as a survival mechanism in genuinely difficult circumstances. Maybe she experienced real trauma, real abandonment, real betrayal. But somewhere along the way, she discovered that suffering provided benefits that healing could not. Pain gave her attention, sympathy, special treatment, and most importantly, a sense of moral superiority over those who hurt her. Jung observed that victim-identified women develop sophisticated psychological systems to maintain their suffering. They unconsciously sabotage solutions, reject help that would actually work, and create new problems when old ones get resolved. This isn't conscious manipulation. It's unconscious self-preservation. Without her pain, who would she be? This is why your attempts to help felt futile. You thought you were offering rescue from her misery, but she experienced your help as an attack on her identity. Every solution you proposed threatened to take away something essential to her sense of self. She needed you to witness her suffering, not eliminate it. The victim identity creates a peculiar relationship with responsibility. She sees herself as the passive recipient of life's cruelties rather than an active participant in her own experience. This worldview makes her feel powerless, but it also absolves her of the terrifying burden of choice. If she's always the victim, she never has to be accountable for her life's direction. Jung realized that women trapped in victim consciousness cannot love authentically because love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires admitting that she has some control over her experience. To love you fully, she would need to acknowledge that she chose you, that she's participating in creating the relationship, that she bears some responsibility for its success or failure. But these acknowledgements would shatter her victim identity. This explains why she could accept your love while never fully reciprocating. Your love became more evidence of her specialness, another person drawn to rescue her from her tragic circumstances. But reciprocating would require stepping out of the victim role and into the role of someone who has something valuable to offer. That transformation felt more threatening than staying unloved. The victim identity also explains her relationship with other people's problems. She's attracted to broken people not because she wants to help them, but because their brokenness validates her own suffering. She surrounds herself with other victims, creating a community bonded by shared pain rather than shared joy. Your attempts to introduce positivity into this ecosystem felt like betrayal of the group's foundational values. Jung saw that victim-identified women often have an investment in proving that love cannot heal, that hope is naive, that happiness is temporary. Your love became a test case for her worldview. If she allowed your love to heal her, she would have to admit that her years of suffering were partially self-imposed. It's easier to reject love than to question the story that has defined her existence. The victim identity creates a peculiar form of pride. She takes strange satisfaction in having endured more than others, in being uniquely damaged, in requiring special understanding that ordinary people cannot provide. This pride masquerades as humility. She's not claiming to be better than others, just more wounded. But the underlying message is the same. She's special, and her specialness is rooted in her suffering. This is why she could seem to love drama more than peace. Drama validates her victim narrative, provides new material for her story of persecution, and gives her opportunities to demonstrate her long-suffering nature. Peace, by contrast, threatens to reveal that she's capable of happiness, which would undermine everything she believes about herself and her circumstances. The most tragic aspect is that she often pushes away the very people who could genuinely help her heal. She's attracted to people who will participate in her victim narrative, those who will hurt her, neglect her, or confirm her beliefs about her powerlessness. People who offer genuine love and support feel dangerous because they threaten to expose the self-imposed nature of her prison. Jung understood that trying to love someone out of victim consciousness is like trying to convince someone to leave a house they've spent years building. Even if the house is uncomfortable, it's familiar. Even if it's limiting, it's safe. Even if it's painful, it's theirs. The victim identity may be a prison, but it's a prison she controls, and control feels more valuable than freedom. 9. The moment she realizes love would mean losing herself. Carl Jung understood that some women have constructed their entire identity around being unloved, independent, or emotionally unavailable. When genuine love appears, it doesn't feel like salvation, it feels like death. They don't reject love because they don't want it. They reject it because accepting it would require becoming someone they don't recognize. You offered her everything she claimed to want: security, devotion, understanding, partnership. But Jung would explain why this felt threatening rather than wonderful. She had built her entire sense of self around not having these things. Her independence wasn't just a preference, it was her identity. Her emotional unavailability wasn't just a defense mechanism, it was who she believed herself to be. The fear of losing herself in love runs deeper than the common worry about losing individual interests or friendships. This is existential terror about the dissolution of the self she has carefully constructed over years or decades. She has spent so much time being the woman who doesn't need anyone that she cannot imagine, being the woman who chooses to be with someone. Jung observed that women with this complex often have a history of defining themselves in opposition to others' expectations. Maybe she grew up watching her mother lose herself in marriage. Maybe she witnessed friends become unrecognizable after falling in love. Maybe she survived difficult relationships by promising herself she would never be that vulnerable again. Her independence became her religion, and your love felt like apostasy. This is why she could seem to want love while simultaneously sabotaging it. Part of her genuinely craved connection, but a deeper part recognized that real love would require dismantling the protective identity she had spent years perfecting. She wasn't choosing between love and independence. She was choosing between love and the version of herself she knew how to be. The identity crisis creates a peculiar form of relationship ambivalence. She's simultaneously drawn to your love and repelled by what accepting it would mean. Every moment of genuine connection is followed by panic about losing herself. Every step toward intimacy triggers an equal and opposite step toward self-preservation. Jung realized that these women often test love by trying to maintain their old identity within it. They want to be loved exactly as they are, without having to grow, change, or adapt. But love is inherently transformative. It requires becoming someone who can receive love, give love, and exist in partnership. The woman who cannot love is not the same woman who can love. They are fundamentally different people. This explains her hot and cold behavior that probably drove you crazy. When she was cold, she was protecting her familiar identity. When she was hot, she was briefly allowing herself to imagine becoming someone new. But the moment that new identity started to feel real, her protective systems would activate, and she would retreat back to the safety of her old self. The identity protection also manifests in her relationship with vulnerability. She's not just afraid of being hurt. She's afraid of becoming the kind of person who can be hurt. Vulnerability requires a fundamental shift in self-concept from invulnerable to human, from self-sufficient to interdependent, from safe to alive. These shifts feel like death to someone whose identity depends on the opposite qualities. Jung saw that women with this complex often have an investment in being unique, special, or different from other women. Being the woman who doesn't need love, doesn't depend on men, doesn't lose herself in relationships becomes a source of pride. Your love threatened not just her independence, but her sense of superiority over women who do need love. The most painful aspect is that she often wants to want love more than she wants love itself. She's attracted to the idea of being the kind of person who can love and be loved, but she cannot bridge the gap between wanting to be that person and actually becoming her. The transformation feels too radical, too dangerous, too much like losing everything she has worked to become. Carl Jung spent decades studying the human psyche, but there was one conclusion he rarely spoke about openly. Some people are so committed to their psychological patterns that they will choose familiar suffering over unfamiliar joy. The woman who couldn't love you wasn't broken. She was protecting a version of herself that felt safer than the version that could love. Jung knew that insight without action is just elegant suffering. The question isn't whether you can understand her now. It's whether you can understand yourself enough to stop choosing people who cannot choose you back.
Imagine discovering a secret that forever changed how one of humanity's greatest writers viewed love and betrayal. In 1850, Fyodor Dostoevsky was sent to the Siberian gulags, condemned to 4 years of hard labor. There, among murderers, thieves, and revolutionaries, he witnessed something that would shatter his beliefs about female nature. What did these condemned men know about female loyalty that civilized society ignored? Why were their wives abandoning them, while common criminals received letters of eternal love? Dostoevsky observed a disturbing pattern that would later influence masterworks like Crime and Punishment and The Brothers Karamazov. This knowledge, forged in the Siberian ice among society's most despised, reveals brutal truths about attraction, status, and female psychology that few dare to admit. The revelation was so profound that it transformed not only his understanding of women, but reshaped Russian literature forever. Prepare to discover what the prisoners of Siberia taught the master of Russian literature about the hearts of women. A secret so raw and uncomfortable that it challenges everything we believe about love and loyalty. 1. The prison shock. What Dostoevsky saw in his first days. The iron gates slammed shut behind him, but the real prison bars weren't made of steel. They were made of shattered illusions about female nature. Dostoevsky entered the Siberian prison camp in 1850, believing he understood women. 4 years later, he would emerge knowing a truth so dark that it would haunt every word he ever wrote again. Within his first week, the brutal reality hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. Mailcall revealed a pattern that defied everything civilized society had taught him about feminine loyalty. The educated prisoners, men who had sacrificed everything for noble causes, stood empty-handed, while murderers, rapists, and thieves eagerly read passionate love letters from devoted women. These weren't sympathy letters or dutiful family correspondence. They were burning declarations of desire from women who knew exactly what crimes these men had committed. Women who sent money, photographs, and promises of eternal faithfulness to men who had destroyed innocent lives with their bare hands. The more violent the criminal, the more passionate the letters became. Dostoevsky watched in sick fascination as one murderer received 3 separate proposals of marriage in a single day. This man had beaten his previous wife to death with a hammer, yet women were literally competing for the chance to become his next victim. They wrote about how his strength attracted them, how his dangerous nature made them feel alive, how they dreamed of taming such a powerful beast. Meanwhile, where were the wives and sweethearts of the political prisoners? Where were the refined ladies who had once claimed to share their revolutionary ideals? The silence was deafening. These women had vanished the moment their men could no longer provide status, protection, or resources. Their earlier declarations of love had been nothing more than social theater. The contrast revealed something horrifying about female psychology. When times were easy and the men were free, these women had played at being supportive partners. They attended secret meetings, whispered about justice and freedom, and basked in the reflected glory of their intellectual lovers. But the instant real hardship arrived, their true nature emerged, like a beast shedding its disguise. What shocked Dostoevsky most wasn't just the abandonment, it was the pattern of replacement. Through prison gossip, he learned that most of these abandoned wives hadn't remained alone. Within months of their husband's imprisonment, they had found new lovers. But they hadn't chosen other intellectuals or gentle souls. They had gravitating towards successful merchants, powerful officials, or wealthy landowners who could provide what their imprisoned husbands could not. The female mind, he realized, operated on principles that civilization tried to hide but could never truly suppress. Women weren't drawn to virtue, sacrifice, or noble intentions. They were attracted to power, dominance, and the ability to provide security. Everything else was just pretty words designed to conceal their true motivations. As days turned into weeks, Dostoevsky observed how even within the prison hierarchy, women's letters revealed their instincts. The criminals who received the most female attention weren't the smartest or most reformed, they were the most feared. They were men who had proven their willingness to use violence to get what they wanted. Their crimes weren't obstacles to female attraction, they were advertisements of masculine power. He began to understand that women had always been drawn to dangerous men, but society had created elaborate systems to hide this truth. Marriage laws, social conventions, and romantic literature all conspired to mask the reality that female desire was fundamentally amoral. Women didn't want good men. They wanted strong men who could dominate other men. The prison had stripped away all the comfortable lies. Here, without social masks or polite pretenses, raw female psychology was on full display. The letters to murderers weren't aberrations. They were honest expressions of what women had always wanted, but had been trained to conceal. Every night, as Dostoevsky lay in his freezing cell, listening to criminals read their love letters aloud, he felt his understanding of human nature fundamentally shift. The romantic notions he had carried about feminine virtue were dying, replaced by a darker knowledge that would transform his writing forever. Women didn't betray men despite their nature. They betrayed men because of their nature. 2. The letters that never came. The reality of abandoned intellectuals. The Daily Mail call became a public execution of masculine pride. Every morning, Dostoevsky and his fellow political prisoners would gather with desperate hope, only to watch it die as name after name was called, none belonging to the abandoned intellectuals who had once believed themselves loved. The silence spoke louder than any letter could have. While murderers tore open passionate declarations of devotion, the educated prisoners sat in growing humiliation, forced to confront a truth more painful than any physical torture. Their women had never truly loved them at all. What these men had mistaken for love had been something far more calculating. Their wives and sweethearts had been attracted to their status, their social position, their ability to provide excitement and prestige. The moment these men lost their freedom, their resources, and their social standing, The feminine mask slipped away to reveal the predator underneath. Dostoevsky remembered the salon gatherings where elegant ladies had gazed adoringly at revolutionary speakers. These same women had whispered about sacrificing everything for love, about standing by their men through any hardship, about loyalty being the highest feminine virtue. But when the test came, when their men actually needed them most, these declarations proved to be nothing but elaborate performances. The abandoned intellectuals began sharing their stories, and a horrifying pattern emerged. Their women hadn't just disappeared. They had systematically betrayed everything their men had held sacred. Wives were selling revolutionary documents to the authorities. Mistresses were sharing intimate secrets with government officials in exchange for protection. Some had even provided the evidence that led to their lovers' arrests. But the betrayal went deeper than mere abandonment. Through prison gossip and occasional letters from sympathetic friends, the men learned what had happened to their women after their imprisonment. None had retreated into lonely mourning. None had dedicated themselves to working for their men's release. Instead, they had immediately begun seeking new protectors. The speed of replacement revealed the shallow nature of their previous attachments. Women who had sworn eternal love were sharing beds with new men before their imprisoned lovers had even adjusted to prison life. They weren't grieving. They were hunting for better options. What made this betrayal even more devastating was the type of men these women chose as replacements. They didn't seek out other intellectuals or revolutionaries who shared their supposed ideals. Instead, they gravitated toward the very types of men their imprisoned lovers had fought against: wealthy merchants, government officials, successful businessmen who represented everything the revolutionaries had opposed. This pattern revealed something crucial about female psychology that society worked hard to conceal. Women's political opinions weren't based on genuine conviction, but on social positioning. They had supported revolutionary causes not because they believed in justice, but because it was fashionable among the intellectual class. The moment supporting those causes became costly, their true priorities emerged. Dostoevsky began to see that women were essentially practical creatures, driven by survival instincts that overrode any capacity for genuine loyalty. They formed attachments based on what men could provide: status, resources, protection, excitement. When a man could no longer deliver these benefits, the attachment dissolved, like sugar in rain. The intellectual prisoners had made a fatal error. They had projected their own capacity for abstract loyalty onto women who were incapable of such feelings. They had assumed that women could love ideas, principles, or men independent of immediate benefits. This assumption had led them to misinterpret female behavior entirely. As months passed without a single letter, these abandoned men faced a choice between madness and acceptance. Some broke down completely, unable to reconcile their romantic beliefs with the harsh reality of female nature. Others, like Dostoevsky, began the painful process of rebuilding their understanding of human psychology on more realistic foundations. The letters that never came taught a lesson more valuable than any that did arrive. They revealed that female loyalty was always conditional, always temporary, and always based on what men could provide rather than who men truly were. This knowledge was devastating to accept, but it was also liberating. Once a man understood the true nature of female attachment, he could stop wasting energy on futile hopes and focus on the harsh realities of survival. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the Sim Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. 3. The Criminal's Paradox: Why Murderers Received More Love. The most disturbing discovery in that frozen hell wasn't the violence or the terrible living conditions. It was watching women throw themselves at the most dangerous men alive. Every day, Dostoevsky witnessed something that went against everything society taught about female nature. The worse the crime, the more passionate the love letters became. A man who had killed his entire family with an axe received more marriage proposals than a gentleman who had simply spoken out against the government. A thief who had terrorized villages for years got love poems from women who knew exactly what he had done. A rapist had 3 different women sending him money and begging him to choose them when he got out. This wasn't random or accidental. There was a clear pattern that made Dostoevsky's stomach turn. The most violent criminals were treated like kings by women who had never even met them. These women would write about how strong and powerful these men were, how exciting it must be to be with someone so dangerous, how they wanted to be the one woman who could handle such a beast. What made it even more twisted was that these women knew all the details of the crimes. They weren't being fooled or lied to. They had read the court records, heard the testimonies, knew exactly how many people had died and how brutally. And this knowledge didn't scare them away. It attracted them like moths to a flame. Meanwhile, men who had committed minor political crimes or simply had the wrong opinions got nothing. No letters, no visitors, no money, no hope. The contrast was so extreme, it seemed like some kind of sick joke. The men who had tried to make the world better were completely forgotten, while the men who had made it worse were celebrated. Dostoevsky began to understand that women weren't attracted to goodness, kindness, or virtue. They were attracted to power, and violence was the ultimate display of power. A man who could kill was a man who could dominate other men, who could take what he wanted, who didn't follow society's rules. To women, this represented the kind of masculine strength they craved deep down. The criminals themselves seemed to understand this better than anyone. They weren't surprised by the female attention. They expected it. They knew that their capacity for violence made them more attractive, not less. They understood something about female psychology that civilized men had been trained to ignore. These dangerous men didn't apologize for their crimes or try to appear reformed. In their letters back to women, they were often crude, demanding, and sometimes even threatening. But this harsh treatment only seemed to increase the women's devotion. The worse they were treated, the harder they tried to win these men's approval. What shocked Dostoevsky most was realizing this pattern existed outside prison too. He started remembering stories from his life before imprisonment, how women always seemed more interested in the bad boys, the rebels, the men who broke rules and took risks. The nice guys, the gentlemen, the providers were taken for granted, while the dangerous ones were pursued with passion. The prison had simply stripped away all the social pretenses that normally hid this truth. In the outside world, women had to be more subtle about their preferences, because society expected them to choose good men. But when writing to prisoners, they could be honest about what really attracted them. Raw masculine power expressed through violence. This revelation changed how Dostoevsky saw every relationship he had ever witnessed. All those marriages between nice, stable men and women who seemed content but never passionate. The women were settling for security while dreaming of excitement. All those affairs where women left good husbands for dangerous lovers. They were following their true nature instead of social expectations. The criminal's paradox revealed that female attraction operated on primitive instincts that civilization tried to suppress but could never eliminate. Women were programmed to be attracted to men who could dominate and protect them, even if that same capacity for dominance made these men dangerous to everyone else. As Dostoevsky watched murderers read passionate love letters while decent men sat abandoned, he realized he was witnessing the raw truth about female sexuality that society worked desperately to hide. Women didn't want to be treated well. They wanted to be conquered by men strong enough to conquer others. The letters to criminals weren't aberrations, they were honest expressions of what women had always secretly desired. 4. The female jungle law. the instinct nobody wants to admit. Deep in that Siberian prison, Dostoevsky discovered something that civilization spent enormous energy trying to hide. Women operate by jungle rules that have nothing to do with the moral codes they claim to follow. Watching female behavior through the lens of prison correspondence revealed instincts so primitive and brutal that they challenged every romantic notion about feminine nature. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Women weren't writing to the kindest prisoners, the most reformed ones, or the men who showed the most remorse. They were writing to the apex predators, the men who had proven their willingness to destroy anyone who stood in their way. This wasn't about rehabilitation or seeing good in bad men. This was about raw attraction to male dominance in its most extreme form. What disturbed Dostoevsky most was how these women talked about violence in their letters. They didn't express horror or try to reform these men. Instead, they wrote about how exciting it was to be with someone so powerful, how safe they would feel with a man who could eliminate any threat, how they dreamed of being chosen by someone so strong that other men feared him. The female mind, he realized, operated on a completely different moral system than the one society claimed women followed. While men created laws, ethics, and civilized behavior, women remained secretly loyal to older rules, the rules of the jungle where only the strongest survived and reproduced. Their attraction wasn't broken or corrupted. It was functioning exactly as nature designed it. This explained so much about female behavior that had previously confused him. Why did women claim to want nice guys, but then lose interest in men who were too kind? Why did they complain about bad boys, but keep choosing them? Why did they say they valued gentleness, but respond with passion to dominance? The answer was simple. They were following instincts that overrode their conscious minds. In the prison environment, these instincts became impossible to hide. There were no social expectations forcing women to pretend they were attracted to virtue. No family pressure to choose providers over predators, no economic necessity to marry for security rather than excitement. When writing to prisoners, women could follow their true desires without consequences, and those desires revealed their real nature. The jungle law that governed female attraction was brutally simple. Strength attracts, weakness repels. But strength wasn't measured by character, intelligence, or moral courage. It was measured by the ability to dominate other males through force or the threat of force. A man who had killed was automatically higher in the hierarchy than a man who had merely spoken against authority. This hierarchy existed in the outside world too, but it was disguised by social conventions. In prison, it became crystal clear. The murderers were at the top, receiving the most female attention. Below them were thieves and violent criminals. At the bottom were the political prisoners and intellectuals, men whose crimes were crimes of conscience rather than displays of physical dominance. What made this discovery so disturbing was realizing that women were completely unaware of their own instincts. They genuinely believed they were making conscious choices based on attraction to personality or character. They had no idea they were being controlled by programming that valued the capacity for violence above all other masculine traits. The letters revealed another dark truth. Women were attracted to men who were dangerous specifically to other people, not to them. They wanted to be the exception, the one woman who could tame the beast, the special one who would be protected rather than destroyed by this violent man. They were excited by the idea of being chosen by someone who rejected everyone else. This explained why kindness was often seen as weakness by women. A man who was gentle to everyone was seen as lacking the selectivity that marked a true predator. But a man who was cruel to others while being protective of his woman was demonstrating exactly the kind of discriminating dominance that triggered female attraction. Dostoevsky began to see that every romantic story, every love song, every notion of chivalrous behavior was society's attempt to redirect these dangerous instincts into more civilized channels. But the underlying programming remained unchanged. Women were still attracted to warriors and conquerors. They just had to find more socially acceptable ways to express these desires. The jungle law couldn't be argued with or educated away. It was hardwired into female psychology at a level deeper than conscious thought. Understanding this law didn't make it less disturbing. It just made female behavior predictable for the first time in Dostoevsky's life. 5. The invisible status, how prison revealed the true hierarchy. Behind prison walls, all the fake social rankings disappeared, and the real hierarchy emerged like bones through rotting flesh. Dostoevsky watched in fascination as women's letters revealed a ranking system that had nothing to do with money, education, or social class, and everything to do with raw masculine power. In the outside world, a banker might outrank a farmer, and a professor might be more respected than a factory worker, but women's prison correspondence told a different story entirely. The hierarchy they responded to was ancient, brutal, and completely honest about what really mattered in the game of attraction. At the very top were the killers, men who had taken lives with their own hands. These weren't accidental deaths or crimes of passion that could be explained away. These were men who had looked other human beings in the eye and chosen to end their existence. To women, this represented the ultimate expression of masculine dominance. Below them came the violent criminals, men who had beaten, robbed, and terrorized others, but stopped short of murder. They still received plenty of female attention, but not quite the worshipful devotion reserved for actual killers. Women seemed to instinctively understand the difference between men who could kill and men who merely could hurt. Next were the thieves and con men, criminals who used cunning and courage to take what they wanted from others. While not physically violent, they had proven their willingness to break society's rules to get what they needed. This rule-breaking ability attracted women who were bored by men who always followed orders. At the bottom of this invisible hierarchy were the political prisoners and intellectuals. Despite their education, their noble intentions, and their sacrifice for higher ideals, they were seen as the weakest men in the entire prison. Their crimes were crimes of conscience, not displays of power, and women found nothing attractive about conscience. What shocked Dostoevsky was how perfectly women understood this hierarchy without anyone explaining it to them. They didn't need to study criminal records or analyze case files. Something deep in their minds automatically ranked these men based on their capacity for dominance, and their attraction followed that ranking with mathematical precision. The letters themselves revealed this hierarchy in brutal detail. Women writing to killers used language filled with awe and submission. They wrote about feeling honored to be noticed by such powerful men, about how safe they would feel under their protection, about how exciting it would be to belong to someone so feared by other men. Letters to lesser criminals were still passionate but carried less reverence. These women saw potential in their chosen men, but weren't quite as overwhelmed by their dominance. They wrote more about taming and reforming, as if these men needed some improvement to reach the top tier. The few letters that went to non-violent criminals were practical rather than passionate. These women wrote about business arrangements, about what they could gain from the relationship, about practical concerns rather than burning desire. The raw attraction was missing. And the political prisoners, the silence was their ranking. In the female mind, men who fought with ideas instead of fists, who sacrificed for abstract principles instead of concrete gains, who chose suffering over success, these men had disqualified themselves from consideration entirely. This invisible status system explains so much about female behavior in the outside world too. Why did women lose interest in men who were too agreeable? Because agreement signaled low status in the dominance hierarchy. Why were they attracted to men who seemed slightly dangerous or unpredictable? Because these traits suggested the capacity for dominance. The prison environment had stripped away all the social camouflage that normally hid this hierarchy. In regular society, wealth, education, and social position could mask a man's true rank in the dominant system. But in prison, where all men were equally stripped of external resources, only raw masculine power remained, and women responded to that power with perfect accuracy. Dostoevsky realized that every interaction between men and women was really about this hidden ranking system. Women were constantly, unconsciously measuring men's position in the dominance hierarchy and adjusting their behavior accordingly. They couldn't help themselves. It was programmed too deep to resist. The most disturbing part was that women seemed completely unaware they were doing this. They genuinely believed they were choosing men based on personality, character, or emotional connection. They had no idea their attraction was being controlled by ancient programming that valued the capacity for violence above all other masculine traits. This invisible hierarchy wasn't fair, wasn't moral, and wasn't something that could be changed by education or social progress. It was hardwired into female psychology at a level deeper than conscious thought, and it would continue operating regardless of what women claimed to want or what society said they should desire. 6. Lessons from the House of the Dead. What the condemned knew about women. The murderers and thieves possessed knowledge about women that centuries of poetry and philosophy had failed to capture. These condemned men, society's rejects, understood female psychology better than the most educated gentlemen, and their success with women proved it every single day. While intellectuals wrote romantic theories about love and devotion, criminals lived by practical rules that actually worked. They knew women responded to strength, not kindness. They knew female loyalty was earned through dominance, not devotion. They knew that treating women too well was the fastest way to lose their interest. The first lesson these men taught through their actions was simple: never apologize for your nature. The political prisoners constantly tried to explain themselves, to justify their actions, to appear reformed and worthy of forgiveness. The criminals never bothered. They wrote to women exactly as they were, crude, demanding, sometimes threatening, and women responded with increasing passion. One killer told Dostoevsky something that haunted him for years. Smart men think too much about what women say they want. Stupid men like me just watch what they actually do. And what they do is chase after the men who treat them worst. This observation, coming from a man who couldn't even read properly, cut deeper than any philosophical treatise. The condemned men understood that women tested men constantly, usually without realizing they were doing it. They would make demands, create drama, or act unreasonably to see how the man would respond. Weak men would try to please them, negotiate, or apologize. Strong men would simply refuse to play the game, and that refusal was what women actually wanted to see. These criminals had learned through trial and error that female attraction worked backwards from what society claimed. Being too available made women lose interest. Being too agreeable made them feel contempt. Being too generous made them take advantage. The men who received the most passionate letters were the ones who were least accommodating to female whims. Another lesson that emerged from watching these interactions was that women were attracted to men who had other options. The criminals who received letters from multiple women were the most desired by each individual woman. Competition didn't drive women away. It made them fight harder for attention. The political prisoners, who desperately needed just one letter, got none, partly because their neediness was repulsive to female psychology. The condemned men also understood something crucial about female psychology that educated men missed. Women wanted to feel chosen by someone who didn't need them, not pursued by someone who did. The difference was subtle, but crucial. A man who pursued showed weakness. A man who selected showed strength. These insights weren't learned from books or theories. They were earned through brutal experience. Men who understood female nature thrived even in prison, while men who believed in romantic ideals suffered in isolation. The gap between what worked and what was supposed to work couldn't have been clearer. What made these lessons even more powerful was that they came from men who had nothing left to lose. They couldn't offer women money, status, or security. All they had was their raw, masculine presence, and somehow that was enough to inspire devotion that surpassed anything the intellectuals had ever received when they were free and prosperous. The criminals revealed that much of what passed for romance in civilized society was actually negotiation. Men offering resources in exchange for female companionship. But when those resources were stripped away, only genuine attraction remained. And that attraction followed rules that had nothing to do with fairness, morality, or what anyone claimed to believe about love. One of the most disturbing lessons was that women were more honest about their desires when writing to prisoners than they had ever been in regular relationships. The social pressure to appear virtuous was gone, so they could admit their attraction to dangerous, dominant men without shame. This honesty revealed that most of their previous behavior had been performance. The condemned men had accidentally discovered the truth that pick-up artists and seducers would later systematically exploit. Female attraction was triggered by specific behaviors that had little connection to being a good person or a suitable partner. Understanding these triggers was more effective than any amount of genuine affection or sincere devotion. Perhaps the most chilling lesson of all was that these men didn't even particularly like women. They just understood them. Their success wasn't based on emotional connection or genuine care, but on psychological manipulation refined through years of practice. They had turned female psychology into a game they could win, even from behind bars. As Dostoevsky absorbed these lessons, he realized he was witnessing the education that every man needed, but that society refused to provide. The condemned men of Siberia knew secrets about women that could transform any man's life, if he had the stomach to accept truths that destroyed every romantic illusion he had ever held. 7. The writer's transformation. How this discovery changed his work. The man who entered that Siberian prison and the man who emerged 4 years later were completely different people. Dostoevsky had gone in believing in the nobility of human nature, especially feminine virtue. He came out understanding that beneath civilization's thin veneer lay drives and instincts that were far darker and more primitive than anyone wanted to admit. Everything he wrote after prison carried the weight of this brutal education. His female characters were no longer innocent angels or devoted wives waiting faithfully at home. They became complex, dangerous creatures, driven by needs they themselves didn't fully understand. The transformation was so complete that critics noticed immediately. His women had become real in a way that made readers uncomfortable. Before prison, his female characters had been idealized versions of womanhood, pure, loyal, and morally superior to men. After witnessing the truth about female psychology, he began creating women who were attracted to dangerous men, who betrayed good husbands for exciting lovers, who were driven by instincts that overrode their moral training. These weren't villains. They were honest portraits of female nature. The change showed up first in his notebooks, where he wrote obsessively about the patterns he had observed. Page after page analyzed why women chose criminals over intellectuals, why they were attracted to strength over kindness, why their loyalty was always conditional on what they could gain. These observations would later become the psychological foundation for his greatest works. His approach to male characters changed just as dramatically. Gone were the naive romantic heroes who believed in feminine virtue. His new male protagonists were men who understood the game being played, who recognized female nature for what it really was, who had learned to navigate the complex dynamics of attraction and power that actually governed relationships. The prison experience had taught him that most literature about love was fantasy, written by men who had never seen women under stress, never watched them choose between security and passion, never observed their behavior when social expectations were removed. His new mission became showing readers what human nature actually looked like when the masks came off. This transformation wasn't just intellectual, it was deeply personal. The abandonment by his former social circle, the silence from women who had once admired him, the contrast with how female attention flowed to violent criminals, all of this had cut deep wounds that never fully healed. His writing became a way of processing trauma that society refused to acknowledge existed. Critics who read his new work were disturbed by what they found. His female characters no longer behaved according to social expectations. They made choices that seemed immoral, but were psychologically accurate. They were attracted to the wrong men for reasons they couldn't explain. They betrayed good men not because they were evil, but because their instincts drove them towards strength and dominance. The most shocking change was in how he wrote about love itself. Romance was no longer portrayed as a meeting of souls or a triumph of virtue. It became a battlefield where primitive instincts clashed with social expectations, where the strongest survived and the gentlest were consumed. Love was revealed as a form of psychological warfare that women usually won because they understood the rules better. His male readers began to recognize truths in his work that they had experienced but never seen written down. The way women lost interest when men were too available. The way they created drama to test masculine strength. The way they claimed to want one thing, but responded passionately to the opposite. Finally, someone was writing about the reality they lived instead of the fantasy society promoted. But female readers had a different reaction. Many were outraged by his portrayals, claiming he was unfair to women, that he was bitter and twisted by his experiences. Their anger confirmed what he had learned. Women hated having their true nature exposed because it threatened the social arrangements that worked in their favor. The transformation went deeper than just character creation. His entire worldview had shifted from idealistic to realistic, from romantic to psychological, from believing what people said to observing what they actually did. This change infused every aspect of his later work with a depth and authenticity that made him one of the greatest writers who ever lived. What made his transformation so powerful was that it came from direct observation rather than theory. He hadn't read about these truths in books. He had lived them, suffered through them, been broken by them, and rebuilt stronger. His authority came from pain, which gave his insights a weight that academic theories could never match. The writer who emerged from that frozen hell possessed knowledge that most men never gained and most never wanted. He understood the darker currents that flowed beneath civilized behavior, the primitive drives that controlled human action, the uncomfortable truths that society worked desperately to hide. This knowledge made him a better writer, but a lonelier man. 8. The Final Secret. The truth Dostoevsky carried into his novels. The ultimate revelation that haunted every page Dostoevsky wrote after Siberia was this: female loyalty was not broken by circumstances, it was revealed by them. The prison had not corrupted women or changed their nature. It had simply stripped away the social pretenses that normally concealed what they had always been. This final secret was more disturbing than any individual betrayal or abandoned letter. It meant that every relationship, every marriage, every declaration of love was built on conditions that most people refused to acknowledge. Women didn't love men. They loved what men could provide, how men made them feel, what status men could grant them. When those benefits disappeared, so did the love. The Secret explained why his greatest novels became studies in psychological realism that shocked readers with their accuracy. Characters like Nastasia Filipovna didn't choose Prince Mishkin's goodness over Rogozhin's violence because women actually preferred goodness. She was torn between security and excitement, between what she knew she should want and what her instincts demanded. The struggle wasn't moral, it was biological. In Crime and Punishment, Sonia's devotion to Raskolnikov wasn't pure love conquering evil. It was female attraction to masculine dominance, expressing itself through religious language. She was drawn to his capacity for violence, his willingness to transgress society's rules, his position as the most dangerous man she had ever met. Her love was real, but its source was the same primitive programming that drew women to criminals. The brothers Karamazov revealed the secret most completely through Grushenka, who couldn't choose between the brothers because each represented different aspects of masculine power. Dmitri offered physical dominance and passion, even provided intellectual superiority and mystery. Alyosha promised spiritual authority and moral strength. She was attracted to all of them because each displayed different forms of the dominance that triggered female desire. What made this secret so devastating was realizing that women themselves didn't understand their own nature. They genuinely believed they were making conscious choices based on character and compatibility. They had no idea they were being controlled by programming that evaluated men purely as potential sources of strength, status, and genetic advantage. The Final Secret also explained why his books made readers so uncomfortable. He was showing them truths about human nature that everyone recognized, but nobody wanted to admit. His female characters behaved exactly like real women, which was disturbing because real female behavior didn't match society's romantic myths about feminine virtue and loyalty. This knowledge had cost him everything: his freedom, his health, his illusions, his faith in human goodness. But it had also given him the ability to see through the lies that most people lived by. He could write about love without sentimentality, about women without idealization, about human nature without the comforting delusions that made life bearable for others. The Secret had practical implications that extended far beyond literature. If female attraction was based on strength rather than virtue, then men needed to understand the rules of the game they were actually playing rather than the game they thought they were playing. Nice guys didn't finish last because women were broken. They finished last because niceness signaled weakness in a competition where only strength mattered. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of The Final Secret was that it made traditional morality seem almost irrelevant to the actual dynamics of human relationships. Being good, kind, faithful, and honest might make a man a better person, but it wouldn't necessarily make him more attractive to women. In fact, it might make him less attractive by signaling that he lacked the ruthless edge that primitive female instincts were designed to detect. The Secret also revealed why social institutions like marriage required legal and religious enforcement to function. If female loyalty was naturally conditional and temporary, then society needed artificial systems to maintain family stability. Marriage wasn't a celebration of love. It was a contract designed to overcome female nature's tendency toward hypergamy and betrayal. As Dostoevsky aged, this secret became both his burden and his power. He could see through every social interaction, predict every romantic triangle, understand every marital crisis, because he knew the hidden forces that actually drove human behavior. But this knowledge also isolated him from people who preferred their comfortable illusions to uncomfortable truths. The final secret that emerged from those frozen Siberian years was that everything civilized society taught about love, loyalty, And feminine nature was wrong, not mistaken, deliberately false, designed to hide truths that would destabilize the social order if widely understood. Women didn't betray men despite their nature. They were loyal to their nature, which prioritized strength over goodness, dominance over devotion, and genetic advantage over moral character. This was the knowledge that transformed a romantic young writer into one of the most psychologically penetrating authors in human history. The secret was simple but devastating. In the game of attraction, women were playing by ancient rules, while men were playing by modern lies. Understanding this truth could free men from endless confusion and futile hope, but it could also destroy every cherished belief about love that made life worth living. The most dangerous truth is not that women betray. It's that they remain perfectly loyal to a nature we've been taught to deny exists.
Woman was God's second mistake.
A line from Nietzsche that lands like a punch to the soul. It doesn't just provoke, it shatters. A single sentence that feels like a stone crashing into the calm waters of modern thinking. Shocking. Offensive. To many, it's the undeniable signature of deep-rooted misogyny. But long before Nietzsche voiced such brutal thoughts, his mentor, the man who taught him how to stare directly into life's abyss, had already built the philosophical framework behind such darkness. That man was Arthur Schopenhauer. Welcome to your inner mirror. Today, we begin one of our most difficult, and perhaps most necessary, journeys. We dive into the mind of one of the most bleak, razor-sharp, and brutally honest philosophers of all time. Our aim? To understand one of his most infamous beliefs, what Schopenhauer thought about women. Let me be clear. This won't be easy to hear. Schopenhauer's words are not warm. They're cold, bitter. He has been, rightly, labeled a misogynist. And perhaps he was. But here, we don't deal in easy labels. Like all true philosophy, we ask deeper questions. What did he actually mean? Why did he say it? Because maybe, just maybe, behind the bitterness lies a truth too uncomfortable to face. And so, we call it hate, simply to avoid confronting it. We're not here to defend Schopenhauer. We're here to do something harder, to understand him, to explore his worldview not as hateful outbursts, but as the careful diagnosis of a man who believed he had uncovered the illness at the root of human life. And to do that, we must also turn inward and ask ourselves, do his words, even the harshest ones, echo feelings we've known but never dared to voice? To grasp why Schopenhauer said what he did about women, we must first understand the heart of his entire philosophy. He didn't see the universe as divine, peaceful, or even rational. Instead, he saw it ruled by a blind, aimless force, a force with no logic, no mercy, and no destination. A force that only wants to exist, to expand, and to repeat itself endlessly through birth, pain, and death. Schopenhauer called this force the will to live. Everything we see, animals, people, nature, is simply the surface, the visible mask of this deeper will. And we are not truly free. We don't choose with reason. We're not autonomous minds. We are puppets, pulled by the strings of the will. Our passions, our dreams, our obsessions, they are not fully ours. They are tools the will uses to keep its cycle going. The will has one aim only, to preserve life, at all costs. And to Schopenhauer, this life we're trapped in is nothing but suffering. He said life moves like a pendulum, swinging between pain and boredom. We suffer when we desire what we don't have. But even when we finally get it, the joy is fleeting. We soon feel empty, restless, and so we want something new. And the cycle of pain begins again. We are like beggars given a meal today, only to go hungry tomorrow. Happiness? A mirage, a brief illusion in an endless desert of suffering. From this dark and relentless vision, Schopenhauer turns his gaze toward humanity. And this is where he makes a key distinction. Men and women are not two versions of the same human being. They are two separate instruments, used by the will to achieve its biological goal. In his essay on women, Schopenhauer writes things that still sting. That women possess less logic, are governed by short-term instincts, lack a deep sense of justice, and are more prone to deception. These claims are painful, no doubt. But in his view, they don't come from hatred. They come from his metaphysical logic, his belief about how life and the will operate. To him, woman is the purest, most perfect expression of the will to live. She is the guardian of the species. Her instincts, her mind, her being, everything, is shaped by nature for one overwhelming purpose: biological continuation. When he says that woman lives trapped in the present moment, he doesn't mean she is foolish. He means her role is to care for life here and now. Her genius lies not in abstract thought, but in instinct. Her mind is rooted in the real world, in the security of the home, the raising of children, the management of survival. She cannot afford to drift into ideals or lofty truths, because her mission is grounded in life itself. She doesn't search for truth or beauty in some philosophical sense. She seeks security and continuity, for herself and for her children. And Schopenhauer insists, this is not a moral judgment, it's simply the natural function assigned by the will. By contrast, the man is an anomaly, a rare chance to rebel against the will. While woman is designed to fully serve the species, man alone has the strange ability to step away from that biological program. A man can surrender his comfort, his joy, even his life, for something with no survival value at all. He may die in a war for something as abstract as honor. He might spend decades building a cathedral he'll never see completed. He may fall into madness chasing a math problem, painting a vision, or composing a symphony no one asked for. And in these moments of art, science, or sacrifice, man, according to Schopenhauer, is betraying the will. He is not serving nature. He is serving something higher, the selfless pursuit of timeless ideas, the love of truth, the refusal to follow instinct. This, right here, is where Schopenhauer's bitterness takes root. He sees woman as the symbol of life's affirmation, and life to him is not a gift, it's a curse. But in man's creative madness, he sees the rare chance to say no to life, to escape the will, through art and renunciation. Woman is the species' grounded sanity. Man, at his most transcendent, is sacred madness, the only being daring enough to turn his back on nature. This worldview grows even harsher when it turns toward love. To Schopenhauer, romantic love is nature's cruelest deception, the most elegant trick ever played by the will to live. In his essay, The Metaphysics of Sexual Love, he argues that when a man falls deeply in love, he is not choosing. It is the species choosing through him. All the drama of romance, the soulmates, the destiny, the poetry, is just a biological costume meant to hide a brutal purpose, to reproduce in the most efficient way possible. A man is subconsciously drawn to traits like youth, health, and symmetry, not for beauty alone, but because they signal the ability to bear healthy children. And a woman, in turn, is drawn to strength, intelligence, status, and security, because these will protect and support her during the vulnerable years of motherhood. So what we call love is actually a genetic strategy to bond two people who under other circumstances might be indifferent or even incompatible. Passion, Schopenhauer says, is a mirage. It fades the moment the will gets what it wants, reproduction. And this, the moment where love turns transactional, is where Schopenhauer's vision of women becomes not only deeply painful, but for many men, uncomfortably familiar. In his view, women know, even if only instinctively, that their power over men lies in the sexual desire they provoke. And they use it, charm, tenderness, flirtation, and even staged vulnerability, as biological weapons to attract and lock down the best provider and protector available. A woman who marries for love, he writes, is actually securing a lifetime contract of support. A man who marries for love is handing over a blank check to the species. Offensive, without a doubt. Oversimplified? Possibly. But before we burn his books, let's pause and ask something harder. Haven't we seen this in our lives, in the lives of friends? Haven't we seen brilliant men, full of potential, change their entire path, abandon their ambitions, pour out their time, energy, and resources for a passion that seemed irresistible? And haven't we also seen how the dynamic of a relationship changes after marriage, after children, transforming from romantic fire to pragmatic partnership, focused on routine, survival, and order. Schopenhauer gives that feeling a name, and he builds a full philosophy around it. The feeling of being caught, of falling into a beautiful, sweet-smelling trap, whose real purpose only becomes clear with time. But it would be shallow to stop here. To truly understand this philosophy, we need to go deeper, into the life of the man himself, because ideas don't rise from nothing. They grow out of experience, from character, and very often, from pain. Schopenhauer's work is not just theory, it is pain, turned into philosophy. And that pain begins with the first and most powerful woman in his life, his mother, Johanna Schopenhauer. Johanna was not a typical woman of her era. She was brilliant, a successful novelist, and socially elite. After the probable suicide of her husband, she moved to Weimar and hosted one of the most prestigious literary salons in Germany. She was independent, charismatic, and worldly, but to her son Arthur, she was cold, distant, emotionally unreachable. Their relationship was a constant emotional war. She saw him as gloomy, arrogant, and dramatic. He saw her as vain, shallow, and narcissistic. Their letters are filled with blame and contempt. So when Schopenhauer describes women as incapable of objectivity, interested only in the personal, full of vanity and performance, it's hard not to see the ghost of Johanna guiding his hand. His misogyny was not just philosophical, it was the bleeding wound of a child who never received his mother's love. That wound hardened into theory. A theory not just about his mother, but about half of all humanity. It was the desperate attempt of a man in pain to prove that his suffering was not private, but universal. Understanding this doesn't excuse his words, but it gives them a tragic depth. It lets us glimpse the vulnerable man behind the so-called philosophical monster. And it leads us to one of his deepest insights. Hinted at all along, Schopenhauer didn't just hate women. At a deeper level, he feared them. He feared them because he saw them as the most effective agent of the very thing he most despised, the will. He saw women as subtle, irrational, and uncontrollable power, a force that dominates men through desire. A man can build entire systems of logic. He can follow strict self-discipline. He can attempt to free himself through reason and through art. But then, a woman appears, the embodiment of beauty, the promise of pleasure, the siren song of life. And suddenly, the whole structure of reason begins to fall apart. The philosopher becomes an animal again. In Schopenhauer's eyes, a woman's power isn't found in strength or argument. It's something far more ancient and far more dangerous. The power of seduction. The ability to pull even the strongest man off his path. To make him trade his highest values for a fleeting moment of pleasure, for the illusion of romantic unity. She is, to him, the smiling face of the biological prison. And he, the man who spent his life searching for the key to escape, saw in her its most formidable guard. And it's here, in this brutal warning about the power of desire, that the old pessimist from Frankfurt, despite his bitterness and pain, speaks with a voice that still feels disturbingly real. Because if we're honest, and if we look around, Schopenhauer's warning isn't just a 19th century theory. It's a drama that plays out every single day. A man with purpose, a mission that gives his life direction, carries a focused, masculine energy. It could be his work, his art, his spiritual path, his role in the world. It is his North Star. But one of the most common tragedies is this. A man falls under the spell of passion and gives it all up. He makes a woman the center of his universe. His goals, his hobbies, his friendships, all pushed aside. He sacrifices everything at the altar of love. He stops being the captain of his ship and becomes a passenger on hers. And then comes the cruel irony. By giving up his direction, by surrendering his purpose, he also gives up the very things that once made him attractive. His independence, his hunger for something greater, his focused masculine energy. They fade. He becomes needy, dependent, orbiting. And the same woman he gave up everything for begins to lose respect for him. Because deep down, a woman cannot respect a man who no longer has his own center. The love that was supposed to build him consumes him. The connection that was supposed to empower him weakens him. And so Schopenhauer leaves us with a final warning, one that, when stripped of its rage, becomes a clear, strategic truth. Don't be fooled by the perfume of desire. Don't blindly trust your most intense emotions. Look past the beautiful face, the charming smile, the promise of ecstasy. Pause and ask yourself, is this feeling truly mine? Is this the choice of a free man? Or is the species speaking through me? Is this the blind will, using me as a pawn in its endless game, uncaring of my happiness, my purpose, or my soul? This isn't a call for emotional coldness. It's not about rejecting love, it's about walking into it with open eyes. It's about realizing that inside you, two forces exist. One is the individual, who seeks meaning, growth, and mastery. The other is the animal, programmed only to reproduce. The wise man isn't the one who denies his animal nature, but the one who knows it, respects it, and doesn't let it take the wheel. A man who knows himself, who knows his mission, who stays true to his path, can love deeply, but not from need, from fullness. He loves a woman as a companion on the journey, not as his destination. He invites her into his world, but never abandons his own to live in hers. His love is a conscious choice, not a biological surrender. He understands that his worth doesn't come from her approval or affection, but from his own integrity, his loyalty to himself. Schopenhauer's philosophy is a bitter medicine, hard to swallow. But sometimes the bitterest medicines are the ones that heal the deepest wounds. His words force us to confront the idea that even our most sacred emotions might be part of a biological illusion. They push us to question our deepest drives. And they offer a path, a way to a higher kind of freedom. The freedom to not be a slave to your instincts. In the end, we don't have to accept his darkest conclusion, that life is only suffering and that denial is the only escape. But we can, and should, accept his warning. A call to build a center so strong, a mission so clear, and a self-respect so unshakable that no storm of passion can throw us off course. I hope this reflection, deep and yes, disturbing, has given you a new way of seeing. If you've made it to this point, I commend you. You've shown strength and a rare kind of curiosity. But I don't want this to end here. Share your thoughts in the comments, as always, with the respect this community is known for. Have you ever felt this tension in your life, between your purpose and the pull of romantic love? Have you ever wondered if love itself sometimes hides a more practical agenda? Your stories matter. They are deeply valuable. And if you've reached the end of this journey into the depths of Schopenhauer's mind, write the word will in the comments. It will be our quiet signal, our way of recognizing those who are unafraid to explore darkness in search of light. If this video brought you value, please support your inner mirror by subscribing, liking, and sharing this conversation. Your support helps us keep exploring these hard but necessary truths. And remember, this isn't about fearing women, it's about understanding nature, and more than anything, understanding and mastering yourself. Until next time, hold your center.
Imagine for a moment. What if the greatest obstacle between you and true power wasn't lack of money, connections, or opportunities, but something far more intimate and disturbing? Carl Jung, the revolutionary psychoanalyst who unraveled the mysteries of the human mind, discovered something that would forever change our understanding of personal mastery and success. When you stop surrendering to the most primitive impulses of lust, something extraordinary happens. The world literally bends before you. This isn't mysticism, it's deep psychology. Jung observed that men and women who managed to master their lowest desires developed an almost supernatural magnetic force, a presence that commanded respect, attracted opportunities, and literally made circumstances align in their favor. But why does this happen? And how can you use this transformative discovery to revolutionize your own life? Prepare yourself for a journey that will challenge everything you believe about power, control, and personal achievement. Carl Jung stumbled upon one of humanity's most closely guarded secrets during his decades of studying the human psyche. While Freud was obsessed with sexual repression as the root of all neuroses, Jung went deeper, much deeper. He discovered that sexual energy wasn't just about reproduction or pleasure. It was the very fuel that powered human ambition, creativity, and spiritual evolution. In his private journals, Jung wrote about what he called the Great Transmutation, the process by which raw sexual energy could be transformed into pure, creative force. He observed that individuals who learned to redirect their sexual impulses didn't become sexually repressed neurotics, as Freud predicted. Instead, they became powerhouses of achievement, charisma, and influence. Jung's breakthrough came when he noticed a pattern among his most successful patients. Those who had mastered their sexual urges possessed an almost otherworldly magnetism. They walked into rooms and conversations stopped. They spoke, and people listened with rapt attention. They pursued goals with an intensity that seemed to bend reality itself to their will. But here's where it gets fascinating. Jung discovered that this wasn't about religious celibacy or moral righteousness. It was about energy conservation and redirection. Think of your sexual energy as a powerful river. Most people let this river flow freely, dissipating its power across the landscape. But what happens when you dam that river? The water builds up, creating immense pressure and potential energy that can be channeled to power entire cities. Jung called this phenomenon libidinal transmutation, the alchemical process of converting base sexual desire into golden creative power. He found that when individuals stopped wasting their sexual energy through constant gratification, something remarkable happened to their entire being. Their voice became more commanding. Their presence became more magnetic. Their ideas became more innovative and compelling. The secret wasn't suppression, it was sublimation. Jung observed that sexual energy, when properly channeled, became the driving force behind artistic masterpieces, business empires, and spiritual breakthroughs. The energy that most people frittered away in momentary pleasure could be accumulated and concentrated into a laser-focused beam of personal power. This discovery challenged everything society taught about sexual expression. Jung realized that the modern world's obsession with sexual liberation was actually a form of spiritual and creative enslavement. By constantly dissipating their most powerful energy source, people were unknowingly handicapping their potential for greatness. The implications were staggering. Jung began to understand why monks, shamans, and spiritual leaders throughout history had practiced celibacy. Not because sex was evil, but because they recognized sexual energy as the raw material for transcendence. They understood that the same force that creates life could be redirected to create extraordinary achievements and supernatural levels of personal magnetism. Jung's research revealed that sexual energy operates on multiple levels simultaneously. On the physical level, it's the biological drive for reproduction. On the psychological level, it's the engine of ambition and achievement. On the spiritual level, it's the fuel for consciousness expansion and personal transformation. When you stop bleeding this energy through constant sexual gratification, all three levels begin to accumulate power simultaneously. This accumulation creates what Jung termed numinous presence, a quality that makes certain individuals seem larger than life, almost divine in their influence and impact. They become what he called carriers of the transcendent function, individuals who bridge the gap between ordinary consciousness and extraordinary achievement. The dark secret Jung uncovered was that society actively discourages this accumulation of power. A population that constantly dissipates its sexual energy is easier to control, more dependent on external validation, and less likely to challenge established power structures. The sexual revolution wasn't liberation. It was a form of energetic castration that kept the masses weak and compliant. Jung's discovery explains why certain historical figures possessed such overwhelming charisma and influence. They had learned, either consciously or unconsciously, to harness and redirect their sexual energy into their life's work. This wasn't about denying their sexuality. It was about elevating it to serve a higher purpose. 2. Why your life force is being wasted every single day. Every morning, you wake up with a finite amount of life force, what Jung called psychic energy. This isn't just metaphorical. It's a measurable reality that affects every aspect of your daily performance, from your ability to focus and make decisions to your capacity for creativity and leadership. Yet most people unconsciously squander this precious resource before they even realize they possess it. Jung's research revealed that sexual energy isn't separate from your overall life force. It's the concentrated essence of it. When you dissipate sexual energy through frequent gratification, you're not just experiencing momentary pleasure. You're literally draining the power source that fuels your ambition, creativity, and personal magnetism. It's like having a high-performance sports car and choosing to drain most of the fuel before attempting to win a race. The modern world has created what Jung would have called a perfect storm of energetic depletion. Everywhere you look, there are triggers designed to activate and drain your sexual energy. Social media feeds filled with provocative imagery, entertainment that sexualizes everything, and a culture that promotes instant gratification over delayed satisfaction. These aren't accidents. They're systematic methods of keeping your most powerful energy source in a constant state of depletion. Consider the average person's daily routine. They wake up, immediately check their phone, and within minutes are exposed to dozens of subtle sexual triggers. Their brain releases dopamine, their sexual energy activates, and instead of channeling this power toward meaningful goals, they dissipate it through mindless scrolling, fantasy, or immediate gratification. By the time they attempt to focus on important tasks, their energetic reserves are already compromised. Jung observed that this pattern creates what he called the mediocrity trap. When your life force is constantly being leaked through sexual dissipation, you operate at a fraction of your potential capacity. Your ideas lack power. Your presence lacks magnetism. Your goals lack the energetic backing necessary to manifest them into reality. You become part of the masses, energetically depleted, spiritually disconnected, and dependent on external sources for motivation and validation. The chaos in your mind isn't separate from the chaos in your energy. They're intimately connected. Based on Jung's principles of shadow integration and mental clarity, there's a powerful method called SIM that addresses this mental turbulence at its root. This simple 5-minute daily practice illuminates your mind, integrates your shadow, and creates the inner peace necessary for true energetic mastery. When your mind is clear and integrated, conserving your life force becomes natural rather than forced. You'll find the complete guide to this transformative method in the first pinned comment below. The tragedy is that most people don't even realize they're being systematically drained. They accept low energy, lack of motivation, and diminished personal power as normal aspects of adult life. They blame their circumstances, their genetics, or their environment for their lack of achievement, never recognizing that they're voluntarily bleeding their most precious resource every single day. Jung's analysis went even deeper. He discovered that sexual energy depletion affects not just individual performance but entire life trajectories. When you consistently operate from a depleted state, you make different choices. You settle for less in relationships, careers, and personal growth. You become reactive rather than proactive, following others' visions instead of creating your own. You lose the energetic intensity necessary to pursue extraordinary goals. The energetic depletion also affects your ability to access what Jung called the transcendent function, the bridge between conscious and unconscious awareness that generates breakthrough insights and creative solutions. When your life force is scattered through sexual dissipation, your consciousness becomes fragmented and surface level. You lose access to the deeper wells of wisdom and intuition that could transform your life. Jung noticed that individuals who conserved their sexual energy reported dramatic improvements in multiple areas simultaneously. Their focus became laser-sharp. Their creativity exploded. Their confidence soared. Their ability to influence others increased exponentially. They began attracting opportunities, relationships, and resources that had previously seemed impossible to obtain. This happens because sexual energy conservation creates what Jung termed energetic coherence. Instead of your life force being scattered across multiple points of dissipation, it becomes concentrated and aligned. This concentrated energy creates a powerful magnetic field around your personality that attracts success, respect, and influence. The waste isn't just individual, it's generational. Jung realized that societies that encourage sexual energy dissipation produce generations of energetically depleted individuals who lack the power to create meaningful change or pursue transcendent goals. They become consumers rather than creators, followers rather than leaders, dependent rather than sovereign. The path forward requires recognizing that your sexual energy is your life force in its most concentrated form. Every time you waste it through mindless gratification, you're choosing mediocrity over mastery, weakness over power, and dependency over sovereignty. Jung's research proved that when you stop this waste and begin conserving and redirecting this energy, you don't just improve, you transform into an entirely different category of human being. The question isn't whether you can afford to conserve your sexual energy. The question is whether you can afford to keep wasting the very force that could transform your life from ordinary to extraordinary. Jung's discoveries suggest that the choice you make regarding your sexual energy will determine not just your level of success, but your entire destiny as a human being. The tragedy is that most people don't even realize they're being systematically drained. They accept low energy, lack of motivation, and diminished personal power as normal aspects of adult life. They blame their circumstances, their genetics, or their environment for their lack of achievement, never recognizing that they're voluntarily bleeding their most precious resource every single day. Jung's analysis went even deeper. He discovered that sexual energy depletion affects not just individual performance, but entire life trajectories. When you consistently operate from a depleted state, you make different choices. You settle for less in relationships, careers, and personal growth. You become reactive rather than proactive, following others' visions instead of creating your own. You lose the energetic intensity necessary to pursue extraordinary goals. The energetic depletion also affects your ability to access what Jung called the transcendent function, the bridge between conscious and unconscious awareness that generates breakthrough insights and creative solutions. When your life force is scattered through sexual dissipation, your consciousness becomes fragmented and surface level. You lose access to the deeper wells of wisdom and intuition that could transform your life. Jung noticed that individuals who conserved their sexual energy reported dramatic improvements in multiple areas simultaneously. Their focus became laser-sharp. Their creativity exploded. Their confidence soared. Their ability to influence others increased exponentially. They began attracting opportunities, relationships, and resources that had previously seemed impossible to obtain. This happens because sexual energy conservation creates what Jung termed energetic coherence. Instead of your life force being scattered across multiple points of dissipation, it becomes concentrated and aligned. This concentrated energy creates a powerful magnetic field around your personality that attracts success, respect, and influence. the waste isn't just individual, it's generational. Jung realized that societies that encourage sexual energy dissipation produce generations of energetically depleted individuals who lack the power to create meaningful change or pursue transcendent goals. They become consumers rather than creators, followers rather than leaders, dependent rather than sovereign. The path forward requires recognizing that your sexual energy is your life force in its most concentrated form. Every time you waste it through mindless gratification, you're choosing mediocrity over mastery, weakness over power, and dependency over sovereignty. Jung's research proved that when you stop this waste and begin conserving and redirecting this energy, you don't just improve, you transform into an entirely different category of human being. The question isn't whether you can afford to conserve your sexual energy. The question is whether you can afford to keep wasting the very force that could transform your life from ordinary to extraordinary. Jung's discoveries suggest that the choice you make regarding your sexual energy will determine not just your level of success, but your entire destiny as a human being. 3. The alchemical transformation. From slave of desires to master of reality. Jung understood something that ancient alchemists had known for millennia. The process of transformation isn't just metaphorical, it's a literal conversion of base material into something precious and powerful. In human terms, this meant transforming raw sexual impulse into refined creative force, converting animalistic desire into godlike mastery over one's environment and circumstances. The alchemical process Jung observed begins with what he called the nigredo, the dark night of the soul that occurs when you first attempt to contain your sexual energy. This isn't pleasant. Your body rebels. Your mind creates elaborate justifications for why you should return to old patterns. Society tells you you're repressing yourself. But Jung recognized this discomfort as the necessary first stage of transformation, like heating base metals until they begin to break down their existing molecular structure. During this initial phase, most people surrender. They interpret the discomfort as evidence that they're doing something wrong, something unnatural. They don't understand that discomfort is the very mechanism of transformation. Jung observed that those who pushed through this dark phase discovered something remarkable. The energy that had previously scattered outward through sexual dissipation began to turn inward, creating intense internal pressure that eventually reorganized their entire psychological structure. The second stage, which Jung termed albedo, involves the purification of this concentrated energy. As you continue to contain your sexual force rather than dissipating it, something extraordinary begins to happen. The energy doesn't just accumulate, it transforms. Raw sexual desire becomes refined creative ambition. Base physical impulses evolve into sophisticated strategic thinking. Animal magnetism transmutes into divine charisma. Jung documented this transformation in case study after case study. Patients who had been scattered, unfocused, and powerless gradually developed laser-like concentration, unwavering determination, and an almost supernatural ability to influence others. They didn't just gain willpower, they fundamentally altered their relationship with reality itself. The key insight Jung discovered was that sexual energy operates as what he called prima materia, the primary substance from which all higher human capacities are constructed. When you constantly release this energy through sexual gratification, you're literally preventing the construction of your higher self. You remain trapped in the basement of human potential, never accessing the upper floors of consciousness that contain your real power. The third stage, Kitrinitas, involves the yellowing or awakening phase where the transformed energy begins to manifest tangible results in the external world. Jung observed that individuals who had successfully transmuted their sexual energy started attracting opportunities that had previously been invisible to them. Their enhanced presence opened doors that had been closed. Their concentrated focus generated insights that solved problems others couldn't even comprehend. But the transformation goes deeper than external success. Jung found that sexual energy conservation creates what he called psychological gold, a state of consciousness characterized by unshakable confidence, natural leadership ability, and an almost magnetic attraction that draws people, resources, and opportunities into one's orbit. This isn't arrogance or manipulation. It's the natural result of operating from a more concentrated and refined energetic frequency. The final stage, rubedo, represents the reddening or completion of the alchemical process. At this level, the individual has become what Jung termed a master of reality. They don't just navigate circumstances, they actively shape them. Their concentrated will becomes a force that literally bends probability in their favor. What others call luck, they recognize as the natural result of operating from a transformed energetic state. Jung's clinical observations revealed that this transformation follows predictable patterns. First, physical vitality increases dramatically. Sleep becomes more restful, energy levels stabilize, and the body develops what he called luminous health. Second, mental faculties sharpen exponentially. Memory improves, creativity explodes, and problem-solving abilities reach unprecedented levels. Third, emotional mastery develops naturally. The turbulent emotional patterns that characterize most people's lives give way to profound inner stability and unshakable peace. The most remarkable aspect of this alchemical transformation is its effect on personal magnetism. Jung documented how individuals who had successfully transmuted their sexual energy developed an almost supernatural ability to influence others. People sought their advice, followed their leadership, and felt inexplicably drawn to their presence. This wasn't the result of manipulation or technique. It was the natural radiation of concentrated life force. The transformation also affects perception itself. Jung found that individuals operating from transmuted sexual energy literally see opportunities and possibilities that remain invisible to others. Their enhanced consciousness allows them to perceive patterns, connections, and potentials that escape ordinary awareness. They begin to operate from what Jung called the transcendent function, a bridge between conscious and unconscious knowledge that generates breakthrough insights and revolutionary solutions. Perhaps most importantly, Jung discovered that this alchemical transformation is irreversible once completed. Unlike temporary improvements that fade over time, the conversion of sexual energy into personal power creates permanent structural changes in consciousness. The individual doesn't just feel more powerful, they become more powerful, operating from a fundamentally different energetic frequency that continues to attract success, influence, and achievement throughout their lifetime. The journey from slave of desires to master of reality isn't comfortable, but Jung's research proved it's the only path to accessing your full human potential. Every moment you choose to conserve and transmute your sexual energy, you're participating in the same alchemical process that created history's most influential and powerful individuals. The tragedy is that most people don't even realize they're being systematically drained. They accept low energy, lack of motivation, and diminished personal power as normal aspects of adult life. They blame their circumstances, their genetics, or their environment for their lack of achievement, never recognizing that they're voluntarily bleeding their most precious resource every single day. Jung's analysis went even deeper. He discovered that sexual energy depletion affects not just individual performance, but entire life trajectories. When you consistently operate from a depleted state, you make different choices. You settle for less in relationships, careers, and personal growth. You become reactive rather than proactive, following others' visions instead of creating your own. You lose the energetic intensity necessary to pursue extraordinary goals. The energetic depletion also affects your ability to access what Jung called the transcendent function, the bridge between conscious and unconscious awareness that generates breakthrough insights and creative solutions. When your life force is scattered through sexual dissipation, your consciousness becomes fragmented and surface level. You lose access to the deeper wells of wisdom and intuition that could transform your life. Jung noticed that individuals who conserved their sexual energy reported dramatic improvements in multiple areas simultaneously. Their focus became laser sharp. Their creativity exploded. Their confidence soared. Their ability to influence others increased exponentially. They began attracting opportunities, relationships, and resources that had previously seemed impossible to obtain. This happens because sexual energy conservation creates what Jung termed energetic coherence. Instead of your life force being scattered across multiple points of dissipation, it becomes concentrated and aligned. This concentrated energy creates a powerful magnetic field around your personality that attracts success, respect, and influence. The waste isn't just individual, it's generational. Jung realized that societies that encourage sexual energy dissipation produce generations of energetically depleted individuals who lack the power to create meaningful change or pursue transcendent goals. They become consumers rather than creators, followers rather than leaders, dependent rather than sovereign. The path forward requires recognizing that your sexual energy is your life force in its most concentrated form. Every time you waste it through mindless gratification, you're choosing mediocrity over mastery, weakness over power, and dependency over sovereignty. Jung's research proved that when you stop this waste and begin conserving and redirecting this energy, you don't just improve, you transform into an entirely different category of human being. The question isn't whether you can afford to conserve your sexual energy. The question is whether you can afford to keep wasting the very force that could transform your life from ordinary to extraordinary. Jung's discoveries suggest that the choice you make regarding your sexual energy will determine not just your level of success, but your entire destiny as a human being. The magnetism irresistible of those who master their impulses. There's something unmistakably different about people who have learned to master their sexual impulses. You feel it the moment they enter a room, a presence that commands attention without demanding it, an energy that draws you in without any obvious effort on their part. Jung spent years studying this phenomenon, trying to understand what creates this almost supernatural magnetism that seems to radiate from individuals who have achieved sexual mastery. Jung's breakthrough came when he realized that sexual energy doesn't just disappear when it's not released. It transforms into what he called concentrated presence. Think of sexual energy as raw electricity flowing through your system. When you constantly discharge this electricity through sexual gratification, you operate like a device with a weak, inconsistent power supply. But when you learn to contain and concentrate this energy, you become like a powerful generator, radiating a field that others can sense even when you're not speaking or moving. This magnetism isn't psychological, it's bioenergetic. Jung discovered that individuals who conserve their sexual energy literally emit a different frequency that affects the nervous systems of people around them. When you're in the presence of someone with concentrated sexual energy, your own nervous system responds by becoming more alert, more focused, more receptive to their influence. It's not conscious. It happens at the level of pure biological response. The effect is most pronounced in social and professional situations. Jung observed that sexually mastered individuals possess what he termed effortless authority. They don't need to raise their voice to be heard. They don't need credentials to be respected. They don't need to argue to be persuasive. Their concentrated energy creates a gravitational field that naturally draws others into their orbit and makes their words carry unusual weight and impact. This phenomenon explains why certain historical figures possessed such extraordinary influence despite lacking obvious advantages. They had learned, either consciously or unconsciously, to concentrate their sexual energy into pure, personal magnetism. Their presence became their greatest asset, more powerful than wealth, connections, or even intelligence in determining their success and impact. Jung documented how this magnetism affects different aspects of human interaction. In business negotiations, sexually mastered individuals find that others are more willing to accommodate their requests, more eager to form partnerships, and more likely to offer favorable terms. The concentrated energy creates what Jung called unconscious submission, a tendency for others to defer to their judgment and leadership without understanding why. In romantic relationships, the effect is even more dramatic. Contrary to what you might expect, individuals who have mastered their sexual impulses become far more attractive to potential partners. The concentrated sexual energy creates an aura of mystery and power that triggers deep biological attraction responses. Jung found that sexually mastered individuals reported higher quality relationships, more devoted partners, and deeper emotional connections than those who freely dissipated their sexual energy. The magnetism also affects professional advancement in profound ways. Jung observed that sexually mastered individuals advance more rapidly in their careers, not because they're more qualified, but because their concentrated presence makes others want to promote them, mentor them, and include them in important opportunities. Decision-makers feel instinctively drawn to support individuals who radiate this concentrated energy. Jung's research revealed that this magnetism operates through multiple channels simultaneously. On the visual level, sexually mastered individuals develop what he called luminous eyes, a quality of gaze that seems to look through surface appearances directly into the essence of situations and people. Their eye contact becomes more penetrating, more memorable, more impactful than ordinary social interaction. On the vocal level, their speech patterns change dramatically. The voice becomes more resonant, more measured, more compelling. Jung noticed that sexually mastered individuals naturally develop what ancient texts called the voice of authority, a quality of speech that makes others stop what they're doing and listen carefully. Their words carry unusual weight because they're backed by concentrated life force. On the energetic level, the effect is most profound. Jung discovered that sexually mastered individuals emit what he termed presence radiation, an invisible field that affects the emotional and mental states of everyone within their proximity. People feel more alive, more focused, more inspired when in their presence. Conversations become more meaningful, decisions become clearer, and possibilities that seemed impossible suddenly appear achievable. The magnetism also creates what Jung called the attraction paradox. The less sexually mastered individuals chase external validation and attention, the more naturally they attract both. Their concentrated energy makes them inherently interesting and valuable to others, creating a cycle where opportunities, relationships, and resources flow toward them with minimal effort on their part. Perhaps most remarkably, Jung found that this magnetism compounds over time. The longer an individual maintains sexual mastery, the more powerful their presence becomes. Unlike external advantages that can be lost or taken away, this concentrated magnetism becomes a permanent part of their being, growing stronger and more influential with each passing year. Jung's clinical observations revealed that sexually mastered individuals literally reshape the social dynamics of every environment they enter. Conversations revolve around them naturally. Groups look to them for leadership instinctively. Problems get brought to them for solution automatically. They become what Jung called natural centers of influence, without seeking or demanding such positions. This irresistible magnetism isn't manipulation or technique. It's the natural result of operating from a concentrated energetic state that others unconsciously recognize as superior and attractive. Jung proved that when you master your sexual impulses, you don't just gain self-control, you gain the ability to influence and attract others in ways that seem almost magical, but are actually the predictable result of concentrated life force expressing itself through human personality. The tragedy is that most people don't even realize they're being systematically drained. They accept low energy, lack of motivation, and diminished personal power as normal aspects of adult life. They blame their circumstances, their genetics, or their environment for their lack of achievement, never recognizing that they're voluntarily bleeding their most precious resource every single day. Jung's analysis went even deeper. He discovered that sexual energy depletion affects not just individual performance, but entire life trajectories. When you consistently operate from a depleted state, you make different choices. You settle for less in relationships, careers, and personal growth. You become reactive rather than proactive, following others' visions instead of creating your own. You lose the energetic intensity necessary to pursue extraordinary goals. The energetic depletion also affects your ability to access what Jung called the transcendent function, the bridge between conscious and unconscious awareness that generates breakthrough insights and creative solutions. When your life force is scattered through sexual dissipation, your consciousness becomes fragmented and surface level. You lose access to the deeper wells of wisdom and intuition that could transform your life. Jung noticed that individuals who conserved their sexual energy reported dramatic improvements in multiple areas simultaneously. Their focus became laser sharp. Their creativity exploded. Their confidence soared. Their ability to influence others increased exponentially. They began attracting opportunities, relationships, and resources that had previously seemed impossible to obtain. This happens because sexual energy conservation creates what Jung termed energetic coherence. Instead of your life force being scattered across multiple points of dissipation, it becomes concentrated and aligned. This concentrated energy creates a powerful magnetic field around your personality that attracts success, respect, and influence. The waste isn't just individual, it's generational. Jung realized that societies that encourage sexual energy dissipation produce generations of energetically depleted individuals who lack the power to create meaningful change or pursue transcendent goals. They become consumers rather than creators, followers rather than leaders, dependent rather than sovereign. The path forward requires recognizing that your sexual energy is your life force in its most concentrated form. Every time you waste it through mindless gratification, you're choosing mediocrity over mastery, weakness over power, and dependency over sovereignty. Jung's research proved that when you stop this waste and begin conserving and redirecting this energy, you don't just improve, you transform into an entirely different category of human being. The question isn't whether you can afford to conserve your sexual energy. The question is whether you can afford to keep wasting the very force that could transform your life from ordinary to extraordinary. Jung's discoveries suggest that the choice you make regarding your sexual energy will determine not just your level of success, but your entire destiny as a human being. The question that haunts most people isn't whether this transformation is possible. Jung's research proves it is. The question is whether you're willing to trade temporary pleasure for permanent power, momentary satisfaction for lifelong magnetism. In a world where everyone else is unconsciously bleeding their life force, the person who learns to concentrate it doesn't just succeed, they dominate.